Can you go to jail for a DUI first offense in Tennessee?
Yes, in Tennessee, the mandatory minimum jail time, if convicted of a DUI first, is 48 hours, 2 days in custody. There are several scenarios in which those mandatory minimum jail time can be extended. The first of those scenarios is if a blood alcohol content is a 0.15 or higher, the mandatory minimum jail time is 7 days in custody. The second of those scenarios, if there is a child in the car, someone under 18, that mandatory minimum jail time extends 30 days in custody. Avoiding a DUI conviction and that mandatory minimum jail time is our primary goal. Avoiding that is very case specific and fact driven.
Is it possible to get a DUI dismissed in Tennessee?
The short answer to this question is it depends. Every case is so different and is really fact dependent on whether or not a case is able to be dismissed. A case may be able to be dismissed if there's evidentiary or legal issues that gives us a basis to argue against the state's case, where we could suppress evidence, whether the stop was unlawful, the blood draw was unlawful, or the officers didn't have probable cause to make the arrest. Then we may be able to get a DUI case dismissed. But again, it really depends on the facts of the case.
Can you get a DUI in Tennessee even if you feel fine to drive?
Absolutely. So most people feel fine to drive. If they didn't feel fine to drive, they wouldn't drive in the first place. But a feeling doesn't equate to an actual blood alcohol content. The Mullenby effect is a great way to explain the concept. The Mullenby effect is really about you're driving on a roadway and the speed limit's 45 miles per hour. You don't feel like you're going too fast. You don't feel like you're going too slow. But then you go onto the highway, you're going 70, 75, 80, you get off and you're back to that same 45 mile per hour speed limit. Well, 45 now feels a lot slower than 45 prior. And the reasoning is because you were going so much faster. It's the same thing with blood alcohol content. Because your BAC is rising up that bell curve and then it starts to go down, you can still be above that 0.08 on the curve, but you feel like you're a lot less because you came down from your highest peak when you were significantly above that 0.08 threshold. So the Mullenby effect is a great way to explain why someone might feel okay to drive. They might feel like they could pass field sobriety testing. They might feel like they could consent to a blood draw, and there's no way that they're going to be above a 0.08. But in actuality, it's just a feeling, and a feeling does not equate to an actual BAC. So when we think about whether or not you can get a DUI for a feeling, you absolutely can. And the more evidence that you give through field sobriety testing, through blood alcohol content, through giving a breath or blood sample, is just going to give more evidence to the state to convict you of that DUI.
Can you still drive after being charged with a DUI in Tennessee?
For most people, yes. Generally, when you get charged with a DUI in the state of Tennessee, for most people, your license is going to be unencumbered. However, there are times where if you've had a prior DUI or if you have a wreck involving property damage or another person, that a magistrate or a judge can require that you have an ignition interlock device or some form of restricted driving privileges while the case is pending. And another common issue is people worry if they refuse the blood draw or breath sample and they get charged with an implied consent violation is, are you still able to drive right now or was your license revoked? The short answer is no, your license is still generally fine. Your license is not revoked or suspended until there is a preponderance of the evidence hearing held in front of an elected judge. It's not something that just happens because you refused or because you got charged. Somebody has to order it.
Can you be charged with a DUI if you haven't been drinking?
You absolutely can, and unfortunately we're seeing it more and more in Tennessee. In 2025, we saw 419 wrongful DUI arrests where someone was negative for alcohol and negative for drugs. So there's a difference between being charged with DUI and actually being convicted of that DUI. When it comes to being arrested for DUI, there's many factors that go into a police officer mistakenly believing that you might be DUI. There's medical reasons such as diabetes, having hyper or hypoglycemia from having too high, too low of a sugar level. There's fatigue that could cause someone to be too tired to drive. I know in some states they have signs, just like drinking under the influence, about driving if you're too sleep deprived, that you shouldn't be driving. So there's plenty of reasons why an officer may make the mistake specific to alcohol because of medical conditions. But then even when we look at other DUIs that are not even related to alcohol, there's prescription medication DUIs, There's illegal drug DUIs. When we talk about prescription DUIs, there's plenty of prescription medications that do not affect a person's ability to drive. Or if anything, it might enhance someone's ability to drive. I think about Adderall all the time, or we have clients sometimes who are charged with driving under the influence of Adderall. Well, Adderall is going to allow you to perform better as a driver because you're able to pay more attention to the roadways, enhance your ability to drive. And so the 419 that we talked about earlier does not even include individuals who tested positive for Adderall or a low level of THC that did not affect their ability to drive. And so really that number is likely in the thousands of individuals who were wrongfully arrested for DUI. So to the question, can you be charged with DUI when you haven't even been drinking? Absolutely, it happens all the time in Tennessee. It's becoming more and more prevalent, and that's why it's so important, whether it's a prescription medication that may be in your blood that you don't think is the reason why you're being arrested. If you give a blood sample and anything comes back in your blood, the state's going to try to allege that is what caused you to be too impaired. That is what caused that officer to believe that you were DUI and arrest you for DUI, even if on the scene they didn't even know what drug classification they thought you were impaired off.
How long does a DUI case usually take in Tennessee?
So they vary wildly. Some are quicker, some take much longer. Each case is going to be different, but as a general rule of thumb to our clients, we typically advise them to be prepared for about 6 to 8 months, and that can depend on a variety of factors. The first one we're waiting on specifically is if they got a blood sample from you, is the time it takes for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to process that blood sample and provide the results. And then assuming that you were under the limit, is they have to send it back again for toxicology. And so the blood process alone can take several months. Additionally, there's going to be times, and in most counties, where you're going to have negotiation dates before the case is ever set for hearing or motions or anything like that. So while no two cases are created the same, generally the rule of thumb is about 6 to 8 months. And we're never going to rush a case if it means that we're not getting the best result possible, because we don't want timing to be a detriment to the client.